Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we get into tonight's second half, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help, and it matters. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with tonight's second half, shall we? For tonight's second half, I'm going to share with you some Dogman and Crawler experiences. And we'll open it up with kind of a historic Dogman or werewolf legend out of Dickinson County. The Werewolf of Dickinson County. Despite its proximity to Nashville, a short 35-mile drive, Dickinson County has retained its rural character, as well as its legends of ghosts and monsters. One such legend is that of Werewolf Springs, located in what is now Montgomery Bell State Park. Sam Brown, a local school teacher, heard the legend as a child. According to the story, in the late 1860s, a train carrying a traveling circus derailed on the southwestern boundary of the present-day park, and several animals escaped, including two creatures dubbed the Wolfmen of Borneo. All of the animals were rounded up with the exception of the Wolfmen, who disappeared into the forest. Lifelong Dickinson County resident Craig Anderson grew up hearing tales of the county's werewolf and noted the story as one of Dickinson's best-known legends. Anderson and Brown collaborated for an episode of the Renaissance Center production of Dark Encounters Investigated, during which they retold the legend of Werewolf Springs. The episode aired in 2003. A couple of years after the train wreck, a local landowner and his hired hand set out from a farm near present-day Burns for the owner's homestead near Harpeth River. They were making their way along a country road in the location where Highway 47 runs southwest of the park, when something spooked their horses in the vicinity of Werewolf Spring, and they saw a wild creature that walked upright like a man watching them from the woods. The thing seemed to be hunting, and the hired man loosened the reins and gave the horses their head. Though the team was at full gallop, they still couldn't shake the monster, and the men jumped from the wagon and ran into the woods in different directions. The wolfman went after the hired hand, and shortly thereafter the landowner heard blood-curdling screams. He didn't stop until he reached the home of a nearby farmer. He and the other men on horseback returned to the location where they found the horses and wagon, but there was no sign of the hired hand. He was never seen or heard from again. Shortly after there, a posse was organized to hunt and kill the beast, or beasts. The men headed to a clearing near the spring, where large bones were often discovered, believing the location was within close proximity of the Wolfman den. They tethered a goat and divided into pairs to watch. It was dark by the time the hairy monster stealthily entered the clearing and went for the goat. The men commenced firing at the creature, after which they grabbed their lanterns to check and see if their bullets had found their mark. Not only had the beast and the goat vanished, so had two members of the posse. A big game hunter was the next to attempt to slay the Wolfman, and from a cabin near Wolfman Springs. All was quiet the first 2 nights, but on the third, the hunter heard howls in the distance and took aim from the window at what appeared to be a werewolf. He fired, but the gunshot provoked the creature, and the beast broke through the cabin door. By this time, the hunter had climbed into the rafters and began to fire at this monster from above. Again, the shots did nothing more than antagonize this brute. He swiped and growled and clawed at the hunter. Realizing that he only had 2 shots left, the hunter was certain he was about to meet his maker when the sun rose and the creature fled into the woods. The area referred to as Werewolf Springs is also known as Hall Springs, presently accessed through Montgomery Bell State Park's 11-mile overnight hiking trail. Mark Corlew, a longtime resident of Burns and former MBSP naturalist and ranger, explained the Hall family homestead, approximately 150 yards from the spring, was situated between the spring and the Hall Cemetery. The Halls were among several families who lived within what is now park boundaries before 1935, when the land was purchased by the state. The overnight trail passes Hall Cemetery and loops around Hall Springs, where fresh water bubbles to the surface from an underground water table. The spring then follows into present-day Lake Woodhaven. The beast was rumored to live in a cave in Creech Howell, and other accounts of the werewolf/dogman include the mysterious disappearance of a little girl who vanished while fetching water from Hall Springs. She was never found, but several animal and human bones were discovered in Creech Hollow Cave. The caves are now below the surface of the lake. Brown noted several mule and horse bones had been found in the area of Werewolf Spring. This bone site, however, is said to have been a common dumping ground for dead animals by pre-park residents. Though even in its distant past, people knew better than to dump dead things near their water supply. Corlew, who worked for the park for 23 years, actually discovered a cabin near Werewolf Springs, where the big game hunter allegedly fought off the beast. He had hiked the area as a 12-year-old Boy Scout, following an old trail that began at the fire tower at the southernmost point of the park to the cemetery near the springs and into the valley. Much later, he returned to the former trail and found an abandoned cabin. The structure has since collapsed, but an outhouse still stands. He noted the ground around the cabin appeared to have been cultivated at one time because it showed signs of being plowed. Iron ore magnate Montgomery Bell, for whom this park is named, mined the land in the mid-19th century, and he too plays a role in the werewolf legend. Some claim that he was the landowner attacked by a wild man while traveling through a country road. However, he couldn't possibly have been the traveler because the story originates with the circus train derailment in the late 1860s. And Bell died in 1855. Dickinson Model Railroad Club's Rick Hughes noted that the rail line through the park wasn't completed until the War of Northern Aggression, when the Nashville and Northwestern Military Rail line from Kingston Springs to Dickinson at milepost 42 and on the new Johnsonville was extended. The tracks, he explained, wouldn't have been used for anything other than military shipments until after the war. He also indicated there were several wrecks along that line when trains ran from Nashville to Memphis. The old train line runs its original path through the park, he added, though the tracks have been modernized and there have been alterations along the route. The basic path is still the same. The precise location of the crash from which the circus animals escaped is unknown, but sightings of a werewolf/dogman have been reported along both Trace and Turnbull Creeks. Those interested in hiking the Werewolf Springs should visit the park's main office for maps and overnight camping information. Some interesting facts and kind of information on the lore of the werewolf of Dickinson County. But thing is that it's not lore because there has been recent encounters with a dogman in that area. So, I mean, definitely not lore, guys, as we all know. Tonight's second encounter. You cannot deny that people around the world are seeing and having legitimate experiences with this crawler, myself included. I've grown up with a relatively open mind in regards to strange phenomena and things that aren't generally accepted by mainstream science or society, but always approach things with appropriate skepticism. I have spent a majority of my life in the woods hunting, fishing, and mountain climbing miles deep in the backcountry, and so within all of that time I've observed many different animals, plants, and sometimes things that I just simply cannot explain. I've gone camping and trekking solo many times in my life. It was liberating to just pack whatever you needed to survive and go miles deep into the backcountry where animals aren't even afraid of you simply because they are not familiar with humans. It felt so special to be the only one immersed in that environment, but not anymore. Now, hidden behind all the natural beauty is underlying anxiety, fear, and legitimate danger. An environment that once felt so comforting and therapeutic turned into one that drove me absolutely mad with questions and uncertainty, and is now one I will not enter alone, for I know what is possible, and I know what is truly roaming around the forests of northern America. It was 2016 in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania, near Dingman's Ferry, that I saw the creature that forever changed my life and the way I perceive the world we live in. The first time I had ever heard of this creature was during a conversation with a friend who lived in the area for years and had encountered this creature on multiple occasions in very close proximity to his home. I remember him asking me if I'd ever seen anything strange in the large plot of woods across the street from his house, which at the time I had not. However, long before it was brought up, I always had this deep feeling in my chest about that plot of woods. I didn't know what it was, I just knew that it carried a very heavy, dark energy that was strong enough to encourage you to stay out. My friend took out their phone and showed me a picture of this crawler that comes up with any Google search. It's very generic. I laughed it off as he warned me about the creature because I generally thought he was just growing weed or something in the woods and didn't want me to find it. I couldn't have been so wrong. Months had passed with little more than strange noises at night and the sound of some cats being carried off into the dark until the day that changed my life happened. It was midnight. A rainstorm had just dumped a bunch of rain. Me and a coworker at the time had just clocked out and we were heading to my friend's house, who had warned me originally about this creature. His house is on a long, straight road with a dead end. Very few houses, one side, woods on the other. As we're heading down the road with the high beams on, my coworker slams his brakes on and starts freaking out, saying that he had just seen the creature kneeling down in the shoulder of the road. Instantly, without thought, I jumped out of the car and immediately heard running and crashing through the woods in a parallel line to the road. Thankfully, due to the hard braking, the car shifted slightly so the high beams were pointed into the woods, and that's when I saw it. That's when my life changed, my belief shattered, and my reality turned upside down. A 6-foot-tall naked creature with grayish-white skin and long arms ran through the section of the woods, fully illuminated by the headlights. This gave me at least 15 seconds of uninterrupted visual contact with the creature, firmly imprinting it into my head. It ran just like a human being, however, was incredibly fast and jumped over any obstacle in its way until it reached the point where the headlights no longer illuminated the woods. It then pretended to jump and run deeper into the woods. However, it actually turned and headed back to the road, where I lost sight of it again in the dark part of the woods for about 30 seconds. As I was standing in the middle of the road, absolutely dumbfounded with my jaw to the ground, trying to comprehend the severity of the situation. It then crawled out from the woods and crossed the road on all fours about 60 yards away from me and disappeared into the woods on the other side. I've been tormented by this creature since. It makes me confused, sad, and curious. I can't get the image out of my head. I can't forget the feelings this creature gave me while I lived there, playing and toying with my head in waking life and in my dreams. I don't go into the backcountry alone anymore. I can't enjoy the solitude with anxiety ruining it. I can't be free. This creature exists, and so do others that we just can't understand, and it's important that people realize this so they can enjoy nature while also being safe. I'm not sure how this account will be taken, and I'm not really sure why I feel like now is the time to share it, but it's eating me alive. It's given me crippling anxiety, and I have to do something to get this off of my chest. Believe it or not, that doesn't matter to me. I just want people to be safe, and I want my freedom and sanity back, and if coming out about this will help, then I'll do anything. The world truly isn't all that it seems. Today's third encounter. This was in the fall of 2009, a nondescript town in central Oklahoma that shall remain nameless. My significant other lived there most of his life. It's a town where everything closes at around 9 p.m., and only competing gas stations stay open, along with a handful of fast food joints that attract drivers south on the interstate. Facebook was blowing up with folks uploading recordings of howls throughout our town that year. Nobody paid much mind. We didn't, but should have. This was before watch parties and better smartphones. We shall call my significant other Kyle. His parents owned a store in town. The apartments we lived in was south of the convenience store. A field was between the store and the then pizza place, and then the apartments. I had sent him to get a 44-ounce fountain drink that evening. This is his rendition of the events. I had gotten the pops and held them in the cardboard drink tray with the handle. I started home, and I heard this howling across the field, like a howl that didn't sound like coyotes or dogs. I hurried because it was kitty corner from the left. Also, it sounded creepy. I kept on trying to be quiet, but there was ice and it was noisy. Suddenly I hear growling like a large dog is behind me, a little to my 7. The growl was deeper and rumbling, a warped version of a large dog, but not low to the ground either. The hair on the back of my neck stood straight up. I kept walking, but faster, and not looking. I hear it, whatever it is. It's no dog. It's big, too big to not be afraid. It's following me and growling. It feels unnatural, and I feel dread that nobody should feel ever. I walk faster. The pop is sloshing, and I drop one of them as I go to run. It's picking up speed. I look back, and it's a big dog-like creature, massive and black like an American werewolf in London. It's on all fours. I drop the other pop as I book it toward home. The pizza place has its parking lights on. I know if I can get to the circle of light, it will stop chasing me. I hope so, but I know. I run for that light like my life depends on it. I think it did. It was still behind me, breathing heavily with red glowing eyes. Its breath were starting to labor. I reached that circle of light, and it abruptly stopped. It looked like it was on 2 legs. I didn't bother to look for details, though. It just stopped. I didn't. I ran across the street between and across the complex and pounded on my door. My significant other opened it. I managed to save her pop, but I will never walk in that town at night again. I don't know what that was, and I never want to see it again. Tonight's final experience. I was on my way to go camping and had just crossed the Mackinac Bridge to get to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. It was storming and just starting pouring buckets of rain. While driving up a hill, my daughter and I saw a man standing in the middle of the road. There was not great visibility with the sheets of rain, but we both pointed out the man standing in the middle of the road, and we were worried he would get hit by a car. When he turned, it was no man, it was a huge black dog. We both thought that it was a man at first, and then it was a dog, and I cannot explain it. It could have just been the combination of looking up from the bottom of the hill in the rain. I just think it is odd that my daughter and I both thought we saw a man. I stopped on the other side of the road to help it, and so did a man on the other side in his truck. I love dogs and always have to stop and help them when I see them in the road. But I had hoped that someone else would be able to help it because my truck was stuffed with camping gear, and the only place it could go in my truck would be the front seat with my daughter and myself. It was still in the middle of this road looking back and forth at me and the man. Seeing it up close, I was a bit more surprised to see how large it was. I also felt uneasy and intimidated by this creature. It looked almost like a black German shepherd, but also wolfish. I was a dog groomer, so I'd been around a lot of dogs, big dogs too, and this one was huge. And if I had to guess what breed, I'd say a wolf hybrid. The guy yelled over, asking if it was my dog, and I yelled back no. The man then yelled, "Here, boy," and patted his leg, and the dog ran off to him. Seeing the dog was being taken care of, I got back into my truck and headed to our camping destination. My daughter was telling me how it looked like a person standing in the road and then turned into a dog. It may not be paranormal, but it was definitely an interesting experience. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed tonight's Dogman and Crawler Pale Demon encounters as much as I enjoyed sharing them with you. Thank you for listening to tonight's second half. Thank you for your support. Also, be vigilant out there, my friends. Your life may just depend upon it. May the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path that, well, we call life.